Today on the Big 3 in 30, SMU falls to Miami of Ohio in the first 4.
It just all looked discombobulated.
Miami of Florida faces off against Missouri in Missouri.
Jay Lucas blew away expectations in his first year in Coral Gables.
And Iowa hopes to get an upset win over Clemson.
The look at the matchup against the Tigers.
This is the Big 3 in 30 College, the 3 biggest stories on campus from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The Big 3 in 30 College starts now. Thank you for making the Big 3 in 30 your first listen of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Miami of Ohio couldn't get to the NCAA tournament unbeaten, but still proved it belongs in the round of 64 at least, with the first 4 win over SMU Wednesday. Locked On SMU host Grayson Singleton goes over a rough effort on the other side from the Mustangs.
What a shameful effort in the first half from SMU. And I tweeted this out after the under 12 timeout that SMU just didn't show a whole lot of effort. They didn't look ready to play. They were outworked. They looked like they were sleepwalking into the game, which I did not expect from a veteran SMU team. Like, a lot of these guys are not young. You know, Boopy Miller's been around the block. Corey Washington is a veteran. Jerron Pierre Jr. is a veteran. And those guys just look like they were chickens with their heads cut off. No plan of attack. No energy to go after loose balls. Orbiting around the perimeter, chucking up threes as if they wanted to get into a 3-point shooting match with Miami of Ohio, which is nonsense, which is absolute nonsense. And I, for one, do not believe that that was the game plan from the coaching staff. And again, we'll talk about the coaching staff here in a little bit. Don't worry, we'll get to it. But as for the play on the court, Boopy Miller the entire night was dreadful. Jerron Pierre Jr., until a late burst in the waning stages of the second half, was dreadful. Corey Washington, as the game got on and he settled in, showed more effort, but he couldn't knock down an outside shot. They had no outside shot to speak of. And it just all looked discombobulated. And to start this show, again, we're talking about the players, if you're just now jumping on, that goes to the guards. Because the guards have to be the ones who are quarterbacking this whole thing. They've got to be the ones to settle things down and say, hey, wait a minute. We have this absurd size mismatch advantage over Miami of Ohio. We got to go to this from the jump. Instead, SMU takes 6 or 7 threes in the first 6 minutes of the game. Like, what are you doing? Why are we doing this? What is going on? So, I do blame the guards for that. The other thing I do blame the players for, quite frankly, is their lack of energy defensively. And we know SMU is not a good defensive team, but hear me out when I go through the details of how bad this defense was. Number one, they did not rebound the ball very well. They let a Miami of Ohio team who is not as bouncy and not as athletic as them get all those offensive rebounds. And one of the things I said in our shows leading up to this game was that if you allow a team to shoot a lot of threes and offensive rebound off of them and put you in the scramble and not get back matched up, that will lead to even wider open threes. And Miami cashed those in. But also, did the Mustangs not read the scouting report? What was with all the short, half-ass closeouts? And that's when it comes to energy and sleepwalking into a game and things that I can't blame a coach for. Like, I can't blame a coach for every player knowing that this team, constructed as it is, can shoot the lights out of you. If I can go on ESPN.com, type in Miami of Ohio, click over to stats, scroll down a little couple of tabs and see, oh, Miami of Ohio shoots 40% from three. You best know that they know it too. So if you're a basketball player, you know I'm going to have to close out. And in that first half, their closeouts were horrid. It was terrible. And I had no idea what I was watching. None whatsoever. And it befuddled me how your entire scouting report was going to be, we got to make sure they don't do what they do best, which is shoot threes. And we're just going to kind of close out all lackadaisical. Again, that's on players. That one's on the players. And by the way, you saw what happened when they decided, hey, you know what? We're going to go inside and use this mismatch. Because at the start of the second half, they went inside to Iguodala and mostly Jaden Toombs, and look what happened. The Redhawks had no answer for it. But instead, in the first quarter, you had guards that were jumpy. Andy Enfield talked about in the in-game interview that, yeah, we just got to settle in. No kidding. Your guards are frazzled. They're out there sped up against a team that doesn't want to speed you up. I mean, it was utterly ridiculous. From the mental side and an energy side, it was utterly ridiculous how this team came out. And that set the course for the rest of the game. And eventually they just dug too far into a hole for them to climb back out of, even though they took the lead in the second half. Some of you guys on the YouTube chat, and again, put your thoughts down below. I'm going to read them off. Rangers says, you're going to sleepwalk into games when your team culture is letting guys do whatever they want. No playbook, no discipline, no accountability. Ranger Pony says, I love Andy, but very disappointed with him, both over the final stretch and especially tonight. It's one thing if you don't make shots, but walking the ball up the floor down 10 with 6 minutes is bad. And the walking the ball up the floor down 10 with 6 minutes, like, sure, I see where you're coming from, but remember, 6 minutes is a long time. It's a long time, especially when you've got an SMU team that plays a high possession type of basketball and a Miami of Ohio team that was jacking up shots and wasn't even looking like they were trying to preserve a lead. So I see where you're coming from. I get it, but let me throw some basketball context just in a response. Ranger Pony also goes on and says, you have a 7'2" center against little people and posted him up only a handful of times. And okay, so there's two things here. Number one, I did blame the guards for a lot of that because it is their job on the floor, especially Boopy Miller, who has played so much college basketball, right? Who, by the way, was just horrible defensively too. They hunted him. Did anybody notice that? That they just wanted to hunt Boopy Miller defensively. But that's the guard's job to tell somebody on the wing, here, I'm going to give you the ball, get it straight down low, or clear the wing out, and I'll dribble over and make sure I do it myself to get the ball to the post, right? Now, give me a couple more minutes and we'll talk about Andy. But that is something that is part of the job description of being a point guard. Now, the other thing I wanted to touch on is that Miami of Ohio did come out with a solid plan as to somewhat defend against the size disadvantage. And they did a pretty decent job. They really collapsed the floor and played a pack line defense so they could easily double team Samedi Gatolu and Jaden Toombs when the ball was entered to them. They also made the entry passes a lot harder for SMU to get in. So credit Miami of Ohio there. They came out with a solid plan. The one thing is true. Travis Steele thoroughly outcoached Andy Enfield. 100%. I know a lot of you guys are going to have that opinion. I'm not going to fight you on it. As a matter of fact, I probably agree with you. But all told, before I get to Andy Enfield, it was a disappointing night for the players. Poor effort, poor energy coming into the game, and just a lack of knowing the scouting report and a lack of IQ. That to me said it all. I was so confused watching that game. So confused as to how they looked so much slower than Miami of Ohio. How Miami of Ohio, the players on the court, wanted it more than SMU did. I was so confused by that. And still, now that we're done with the game, I still can't really figure out why.
College basketball is nonstop. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. From early tip-offs to late night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. You can build any college hoops parlay you want. You want to pick a number one seed. You want to pick a 5-12. You want to pick a 12 seed, a 13 seed, a 14 seed. You're feeling frisky. You're feeling crazy. You can mix spreads, totals, and player props to match how you see the slate playing out. Then you apply that profit boost and instantly bump up your potential payout. Go safe, go bold, ride with the team you've been following all season long. It's your parlay, your style, now with more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game.
Welcome back to the Big 3 in 30 College. The Miami Hurricanes have the 7 seed in the first round against 10 seed Missouri, but it doesn't feel like the Canes have the advantage since they'll have to face the Tigers in St. Louis, Missouri. Our Locked On hosts preview that first round matchup.
Jay Lucas blew away expectations in his first year in Coral Gables, huh?
Yeah, in my wildest imagination, I didn't think Miami could get the 3 seed in the ACC tournament, finish third in that conference. Miami was predicted by the so-called experts. I think I had one of the votes on this, but to finish 8th in the ACC this year. And it's understandable, the team was awful last year as, Jim Larinaga, who had some, of course, incredible teams at Miami, had a Final Four run a few years ago. But last year was really tough for Miami, and Coach L retired early in the year. Miami played most of the season with an interim head coach in Bill Courtney. They won 7 games in 2025. They went 7-24, and then you flipped the record in the first year of Jay Lucas. They went 24-7 regular season, and they got an ACC tournament win after a double bye. And of course, I had some reservations about Jay Lucas, just with the understanding that he was a first-time head coach. Had some prominent assistant coaching roles, was the top assistant for John Shire at Duke, the previous couple of years, which is obviously a great person to learn from, and from a coaching family from his father, John Lucas. So the coaching chops were there, but when you're doing the head job for the first time, I think I expected a few more growing pains. And then, of course, he had to completely rebuild the roster. There were 0 holdovers, which may have been a good thing from last year's team, but there were 0 holdovers from last year. So all expectations were exceeded in the regular season. And, I think most Hurricane fans are they don't necessarily have Final Four expectations this year, but I think Miami fans are kind of going into this tournament with an open mind, hoping they can get a win or two. And then this first one is going to be really tough matchup with the similarity of these teams. And then also, some Hurricane fans are a little concerned about, playing so close to Mizzou in that game being played against St. Louis. So there's a lot of storylines heading into this one, but I'm excited to break it all down.
Yeah, I could understand if I were a Miami fan, I'd probably be a little miffed that Missouri is so much closer. But sometimes this just happens, especially, unfortunately, if you're a 7 seed, you're not really the priority. There's got to be some logic there. But certainly if I were a Miami fan, I'd be going, gee, thanks for that matchup. We really appreciate it. But to your point, I think the similarities of these teams, I think it's sort of most obvious when you watch Mark Mitchell and Malik Reneau play. And because of how these teams are so similar, I think they're going to have to guard each other too. Yeah. So I sort of, my previous episode, we were talking off air how I did the pointing Spider-Man meme. Well, these two guys almost remind me of another meme I've seen lately, kind of a viral video where there's this guy who's trying to back down like a Buick, that type of thing. That's kind of how Mark Mitchell and Malik Reneau like to play, especially Mitchell in the post. So How do you see this matchup playing? I think they're very similar players. I think Mitchell is a little bit maybe more athletic, but Renaud maybe a little bit more of a refined player. He's certainly a better free throw shooter. How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I see it as a situation where if they both play their best, they almost cancel each other out. Right. But you never know who's going to have their moment, and Renaud, and obviously you could say the same thing about Mitchell. They've been so clutch, for both of their teams this year. So it honestly may come down to who can get the big and one down the stretch in a close game. Who makes that maybe one extra offensive rebound that can spark an important point down the stretch. I think this is a sensational matchup. And if you even go down the statistics, like Renaud averages 18.8 per game. Mitchell averages 18.3 per game. Like, they're almost identical as you go through the stat sheet. So I think really this is one of those where both coaches probably look at it strategically, like, all right, these guys are probably, like you said, going to guard each other. Yeah. And hopefully if they both play their best, it kind of cancels out. And then on the Miami side, if Renaud and Mitchell cancel each other out a little bit, Miami hopes their other big man, Ernest Uday, who's not nearly as much of an offensive threat, but a great defensive player, shot blocker, and offensive rebounder, doesn't finish at the basket nearly as well as Malik or Mitchell does, but maybe a guy like Uday might have an opening to sort of take over the game in big spots. But I could definitely see this being a scenario where the two of them, Mitchell and Renaud, they either cancel each other out, or whoever has the more impactful game, their team ends up winning.
Yeah, I'll just say from a Missouri perspective, I don't hate the matchup on the Mitchell side simply because the teams and the matchups that can bother him are guys who can move their feet, who are a little bit taller. I like that they're basically the same size. They're basically both 6'9", 230, 240, somewhere in there. And since you brought up Ernest Uday, I think I disagreed, with one of my previous guests this week, our colleague Locked On Bets, Lee Sterling. I think Uday knows exactly who he is and is a pretty effective player, but Lee thinks he's basically terrible. Who do you think's right?
I think I don't. And it's funny. Lee is a really good friend of mine, and I know he's a big Miami guy as well. Yep. He lives in South Florida, but I'm with you. I disagree. Like I think Ernest Uday really knows his role and has leaned into it throughout the season. Like, if you were to talk about the Ernest Uday of November or December, I could have agreed with that take, that very inconsistent. But I thought since ACC play started for Miami, I think he's carved out a really important role for himself as a rim protector and as a rebounder. So listen, he's obviously got a lower ceiling when it comes to being a scorer and everything like that. But no, I agree with you. I think Uday knows his role, and I think Jay Lucas has really helped him lean into it.
So that's the thing. If Mark Mitchell and Renaud, if they do happen to cancel each other out, like you've suggested is certainly possible, that's the thing. Uday, I think I know what I'm going to get from him, whereas his counterpart, Sean Phillips, is a guy who's probably a more high upside player.
Yeah.
But he's also got a lower floor, too. He's a very emotional guy. He has a tendency to flail his arms around everywhere.
Yeah, I need him to foul out, by the way. John, just so you know, I'm going to need him to foul out as early as possible.
Well, to your point, in Missouri's previous loss against Kentucky in the SEC tournament, the Tigers lost that game, but in Phillips' 19 minutes, he fouls out in the game. When Phillips was on the floor, Missouri actually won that ball game by about 10 points when he was in there. So to your point, I think that's a really good one. I will say Trent Burns, I think Uday is a good matchup for him, the big 7'3", 7'4" freshman, redshirt freshman center for Missouri. I do kind of like that matchup at least because he can get hurt if you can take him away from the basket.
College basketball is nonstop. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. From early tip-offs to late night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. You can build any college hoops parlay you want. You want to pick a number one seed. You want to pick a 5-12. You want to pick a 12 seed, a 13 seed, a 14 seed. You're feeling frisky. You're feeling crazy. You can mix spreads, totals, and player props to match how you see the slate playing out. Then you apply that profit boost and instantly bump up your potential payout. Go safe, go bold, ride with the team you've been following all season long. It's your parlay, your style, now with more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game.
Welcome back to the Big 3-30 College. Iowa basketball comes into the NCAA tournament as the 9 seed, going up against 8 seed Clemson. But Trent Condon tells us on Locked On Hawkeyes why he thinks Iowa can pull off the upset.
The look at the matchup against the Tigers in the 8-9 game. Now, we talked about it as the bracket was revealed on Sunday night, and take a look at the matchup against Clemson, a team that Iowa is, though the number 9 seed, certainly favored in. And myself as a gambler, that does make me a little bit nervous that there is so much public sentiment currently on the Hawkeye side of things. Definitely one of those things that I don't love to see as somebody that likes to go a little contrarian, go against the grain and go against certainly what the betting public is. And currently the betting public is all over the Hawkeyes. But let's get into the matchup here and really dig into what it's going to take for Iowa to pull off the victory, move on to the round of 32 for the first time in 5 years. Yes, we have to go back all the way back to 2021, the last time Iowa even won a game in the NCAA tournament. Of course, lost the last 2 seasons. Before that, it was a loss in the first round to Auburn down in Birmingham. And the year before that, 2022, the loss to Richmond in the first round. That still stings, as we've had a lot of stings, certainly as Hawkeye fans. Clemson, the first key that you talk about in this game is something that's been out there since this came up. Teams that, when they hold teams to under 65 points this season, they're undefeated. It's a very simple equation. You have to score to beat this team. It is going to be a low possession game. 2 of the slowest teams in the country in terms of tempo. Iowa's going to have to be incredibly efficient on the offensive end of the floor. And as we've talked about at different times throughout the course of the year, though the numbers, you just look at raw data, you look at points per game allowed, those kind of things, they paint a very good picture for Iowa. When you look at it deeper and understand at the pace that Iowa plays at, those numbers aren't certainly at the elite level than maybe that they appear on the surface. Clemson, very similar. 333rd in the country in tempo, defensively 21st. Clemson's also trying to figure things out as they're playing now without their starting center. Carter Welling is not going to be there. 6'11", 240 pounds. He's a beast. He can step out, and knock down 3-pointers too, but a big guy. Really good rebounding rate. Defensive rebounding rate was through the roof, and that is an aspect that they're going to be losing with no Welling in there. He tore his ACL in the ACC tournament. He's not going to be in there. Now, they do have another big body. It'll be Nick Davidson that will see a majority of time in the middle, but outside of that, this is not a very big team, and that goes to one of the biggest keys. 65 points. All right, there's a benchmark. Certainly you want to hit, but the other component is on the boards. Now, Clemson's a very odd team. They are elite in defensive rebounding. They do not give up a ton on that side. They are very, very good when it comes to that aspect. But when they're on offense, they do not crash the boards very hard. And because of that, there are not a whole lot of second opportunities. Iowa can't allow that. Keep those offensive rebound down. They want to get back defensively. They want to set up their defense. Because of that, you can't allow the second chances. Those long rebounds can't go into their hands. Have to secure the rebounds when they're there because they're really not trying for them. That is not a huge component of what they do on that end of the floor. They're going to try to shoot it from the outside. About 33% of their shots come from the three-point arc. That is something that they're going to try to do. They're an okay three-point shooting team, 34% on the season. That's 169th on the country. You can't let somebody get hot. You can't let a guy beat you, somebody that hits 4 or 5 3-pointers. We talked about Nick Davidson. He is a different type of center than Welling, and he is a guy that can step out and consistently hit the three-point shot. He's got 29 of them this season. Their best three-point shooter is Justin Porter. He is hit down 62 3-pointers on the year, shooting 34% from behind the arc. But nobody elite on that end. Keep them out of that one. That is a huge component. I think us as Hawkeye fans definitely know that that is something you have to keep an eye on. The best player for this Clemson team is RJ Godfrey. 6'7", 240 pounds. He is a guy that will get downhill. Pretty good rebounder. Can block shots. A really athletic guy. I anticipate we're probably going to see Tavian Banks on him at times, depending on what the lineup looks like. They could throw a couple of different bodies at him, but that's going to be the assignment that's going to be there, I think, for Tavion Banks early on, is he's going to get that assignment of Godfrey and need to stay out of foul trouble. But for me, yes, stopping the guys getting downhill, that has been an issue for this team. Guys off the bounce, can't let them get into the paint. That's been such an issue for this Iowa team really over the last couple months of the season. And Godfrey, a little bit concerning what he can do there. Dylan Hunter, another guy off the bounce, pretty good. Can do those kind of things and get into the rim. Still, I love this matchup for Iowa. I really do. And as we talked about in the initial grasp, I don't know if there was a better matchup that you could hope for in an 8-9 game for the Hawkeyes. Also, from a Hawkeye perspective, it's time for Bennett Sturtz to be the player we know he can be. It's time to put it all together, put this team on his back, and lead them to a victory and then get their shot against Florida. When you look at, Bennett Sturtz, there's been times where he certainly looked tired. He's coming off the injury in the Ohio State game where he got banged in the quad, and that has been an issue apparently dating back for a while, something that he's dealt with, took another one there. In fact, left the game when he was first injured against the Buckeyes. Getting him the health, the rest that he needs, certainly, and the extra day as Iowa plays on Friday as opposed to Thursday, I think definitely a good thing. You go back to a year ago in the NCAA tournament, what he did at Drake in the first round in their victory against Missouri. He was outstanding in that one. 21 points. He was 8-11 from the field in that game, including 3 of 3 from behind the arc. Tavion Banks was also really good in that game. Manyao, he did his thing inside. And these are the kind of components that you need. You need one of the two off the bench, either Tate Sage or Isaiah Howard, to be ready to go. Going to need their length and certainly their defensive versatility. I think in this game, one of those two guys needs to step up, be able to provide a little something offensively, but also be able to do it on the defensive end of the floor. And I know we say it all the time, but another huge component is obviously Alvaro Fulgaris. And after Fulgaris, the up and down inconsistent season that we've seen out of him, it is time. He played in the NCAA tournament before. For most of these guys, this is not going to be anything new. Cooper Koch is one of the guys that it's going to be new for, and what we've seen shooting from him here recently. Bennett Sturtz needs to be great. Definitely needs to have that component, but he's got to have other guys help him because we know just how limited this team is. Get over 65 points, win the rebounding battle, at least play even on that one, and don't let somebody crazy go off from the three-point line. The keys to the game for Iowa to pull off the win, and I feel good about that one. Now, Florida will be a different one, no doubt, but we'll have you covered here on Locked On Hawkeyes. We'll have a rapid reaction podcast after it goes final on Friday evening here for you, and looking forward certainly to that and seeing this team back in the tournament after missing the last couple of years. It's fun. It's important. I love having the Friday draw. A lot to be happy about, a lot to be positive about, and I think some good vibes for this program, certainly going forward in year number one of Ben McCollum. We look around the league, and you look at Minnesota with Nico Nedved, and you look at, obviously, Buzz, the struggles that they've had at Maryland in year number one. You go through this league, and Iowa is the only team in the Big Ten that has a first-year coach and is going to be in the NCAA tournament. That's an accomplishment. Now let's take that next step. Get that victory against Clemson, and then we're playing with house money with number one Florida up next. The Hawkeyes get the victory. We continue here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Going to talk some more basketball with Tom Kakert. He'll be down in Tampa covering things for HawkeyeReport.com. We'll get his perspective on that, what he expects to see from the Iowa team. Plus, we'll talk about the women as they get ready to face off in their first matchup against Fairleigh Dickinson and potentially a second-round matchup. Who will they play? Well, there's 3 opportunities there with the way the bracket fell in a play-in game that'll be played on Thursday evening at Carver Hawkeye Arena with Arizona State and Virginia facing off. The winner of that one then will get Georgia in the first round.
That's all for today's Big 3 and 30 College. If you follow pro basketball or football, the Big 3 and 30 has shows for the biggest news in the NBA and NFL going up every weekday just like this one. Just search the Big 3 and 30 NBA or the Big 3 and 30 NFL wherever you're listening or watching now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 3 and 30 College.